the Greek Empire, the Russian Empire, the Spanish Empire, the Ottoman Empire. What comes to mind when you hear these names? Silk, gold, wealth, influence. Throughout history, empires have risen and fallen, leaving behind legacies of power, culture, and conquest. But that was a long time ago. Today, these countries are on the brink of bankruptcy. Our team has the inside scoop on 10 nations teetering on the edge of financial collapse. From economies imploding to governments watching their own schemes backfire, these countries are collapsing faster than a balloon running out of air. So buckle up and let's dive right into it. But before we start, here's a little quiz to entertain you. Which country defaulted on its debt in 2022? A. El Salvador. B. Sri Lanka. C. Bangladesh. D. Venezuela. Write your answer in the comment section and patiently watch this video till the end to see if you were right. Number 10. Spain. Spain might seem like an unexpected addition to this list, but beneath the sunshine, tapas, and beautiful beaches lies a country quietly struggling with mounting economic pressures. While it's not a complete freefall just yet, 2025 is shaping up to be a year where the cracks in Spain's economy become impossible to ignore. The first red flag? Public debt. Spain's debt to GDP ratio has climbed to 115%, leaving the country with limited room to maneuver financially. Servicing this debt is becoming increasingly expensive as global interest rates rise, putting even more strain on the government's budget. And what about unemployment? While the overall rate has improved slightly in recent years, youth unemployment is still alarmingly high, hovering around 30%. That's nearly 1 in 3 young Spaniards without a job, a figure that points to deeper systemic issues. Then there's the housing market. Spain has struggled with housing crises in the past, and 2025 is no exception. Major cities like Madrid and Barcelona are seeing skyrocketing rents and home prices that are pushing middle-class families to the brink. Meanwhile, rural areas are facing the opposite problem: depopulation and economic stagnation. It's a stark divide that highlights Spain's uneven economic recovery. And let's talk about energy. Spain has made significant strides in renewable energy, but the transition has come with its own set of challenges. High energy costs remain a problem, especially for industries that rely heavily on electricity. Businesses are finding it increasingly difficult to stay competitive, leading to layoffs and closures. Spain is also grappling with the long-term effects of an aging population. By 2025, nearly 20% of the population is over the age of 65, putting immense pressure on pension systems and healthcare services. With fewer workers contributing to the system and more retirees drawing from it, the financial imbalance is becoming harder to ignore. Political instability doesn't help either. Regional tensions, particularly with Catalonia, continue to create uncertainty. Investors are wary of the possibility of future independence referendums or conflicts, which could further destabilize the economy. Add to this a fractured political landscape where coalitions struggle to govern effectively, and you've got a recipe for stagnation. The government has tried to address these issues with stimulus packages and social programs, but many of these efforts are financed by debt, kicking the can further down the road. With rising borrowing costs and shrinking economic growth, 2025 could be the year Spain faces a financial reckoning. Do you think Spain's aging population and rising debt are insurmountable challenges, or can the country turn things around? Let us know before we continue. Number 9. Turkey. Turkey's economic troubles are like watching a slow-motion train wreck. It's painful, dramatic, and hard to look away. For years, the country has been trying to maintain an image of economic strength, but 2025 is proving to be the year that the cracks can no longer be papered over. At the heart of Turkey's financial chaos is its unorthodox approach to monetary policy. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has made it clear that he's no fan of high interest rates, famously calling them the mother of all evil. Instead of raising rates to combat inflation, like every other central bank on the planet, Turkey slashed them repeatedly in previous years, even as inflation skyrocketed. The Central Bank of Turkey, under pressure from Erdogan, dropped its key interest rate to as low as 8.5% in early 2023, despite inflation running rampant at over 60%. This created a bizarre scenario where borrowing was cheap, but the currency continued to lose value at an alarming rate. The result? Hyperinflation gripped the economy, eroding people's purchasing power and destroying savings. By 2025, the central bank had no choice but to make a dramatic pivot. under mounting pressure from domestic businesses and international lenders, the key rate was raised back to 35% in a desperate attempt to stabilize the lira. However, this sudden policy reversal has created a whole new set of problems. Businesses that relied on cheap loans now find themselves unable to service their debt, leading to a wave of bankruptcies. Meanwhile, ordinary Turks face skyrocketing loan and credit costs, making it even harder to recover financially. The Turkish lira, it's still in freefall. In just a few years, the currency has lost over 70% of its value against the US dollar. Everyday people are feeling the pinch. Prices for basic goods like bread, milk, and cooking oil have skyrocketed. Middle-class families who once enjoyed a decent standard of living now find themselves struggling to make ends meet. And it's not just inflation. Turkey's external debt is enormous, over $450 billion, with a significant portion of it denominated in foreign currencies. As the lira weakens, paying off this debt becomes even more expensive, creating a vicious cycle that's nearly impossible to break. One of Turkey's saving graces has always been its tourism industry, which brought in billions of dollars annually. But even that sector is under strain. Geopolitical tensions, concerns about safety, and a shaky global economy have caused tourist numbers to dip. The government's efforts to attract Middle Eastern and Russian tourists can only go so far, especially with inflation eating away at the value of the Turkish lira. To make matters worse, Turkey is facing a brain drain. Skilled professionals, engineers, doctors, tech workers are leaving the country in droves, seeking better opportunities abroad. For a country with ambitions of becoming a global economic power, losing its brightest minds is a major setback. The government has tried to stabilize the situation by introducing schemes like protected lira deposits, but these are band-aid solutions for a much deeper problem. With foreign reserves running dangerously low and public trust in the economy fading fast, 2025 could be the year Turkey faces a full-blown financial crisis. With inflation and debt strangling Turkey's economy, do you believe it can recover, or is it too late? Share your perspective and let's keep going. Number 8. Russia. This is a typical residential building in Kazan, Russia. It was built before World War II, and today it's not a place where people live, it's where they struggle to survive. Among the residents are veterans of the Kazan helicopter plant. The building is rotting and crumbling and desperately needs repairs. However, there's no budget for its renovation or upkeep, even though this country boasts the second most powerful army in the world. Under the crumbling roof of their own home, residents of Saratov also live in fear of being buried alive. These are cities far from the front lines, untouched by bombs, and yet they look no better than Bakhmut, the war-torn city Russia seized in eastern Ukraine. The stark contrast between the living conditions of Russia's own citizens and its ambitions to conquer another country couldn't be more glaring. And this neglect is just one of the reasons why Russia is sinking economically in 2025. The cracks in its financial system are now too big to ignore. Decades of over-reliance on energy exports have backfired, with oil and gas revenues shrinking drastically due to sanctions and loss of European markets. By 2025, energy sales to Europe, once Russia's biggest customer, have fallen by over 90%, and even discounted sales to China and India aren't enough to close the gap. Meanwhile, once a symbol of Russia's financial stability, the National Wealth Fund has been drained to prop up the failing economy. From over $190 billion in reserves at the start of the Ukraine war, the fund is now below $45 billion, leaving little to cover deficits or emergencies. Inflation continues to batter ordinary Russians, with rates hovering around 15%, and the ruble has lost over 40% of its value against major currencies. What's worse, Russia's spending priorities show a complete disregard for its own people. While billions of dollars are being poured into military expenditures, an estimated $300 million a day to sustain the war in Ukraine, basic infrastructure in cities like Kazan and Saratov is falling apart. Roads, schools, hospitals, and housing projects are left in disrepair, forcing citizens to live in conditions reminiscent of a war zone, even though no bombs have fallen there. Adding to the economic collapse is the exodus of skilled workers. Over 1 million professionals, including tech workers, scientists, and engineers, have fled Russia since 2022, taking with them the expertise needed to innovate and grow the economy. A rapidly aging population and a shrinking tax base have compounded the crisis, leaving Russia stuck in a downward spiral. By 2025, it's clear that Russia's ambitions to dominate geopolitics have come at the expense of its own survival. The country's resources are drained, its global influence is waning, and its people are paying the price. With its economy crumbling under the weight of sanctions, corruption, and war spending, Russia is undeniably heading toward economic and social collapse. How do you think Russia's citizens can endure these conditions while their government prioritizes war spending? Let us know your thoughts before we move on. Number 7. North Korea. Kim Jong-un has been busy crafting a narrative that North Korea is a paradise for its people, showcasing everything from nuclear advancements to lavish parades as evidence of its success. However, it appears that the regime is struggling financially, with sanctions hitting harder than a starving dog at mealtime. The economy is on the verge of collapse, exacerbated by agricultural failures and poor management, leaving many citizens fighting for scraps instead of participating in synchronized celebrations. Ironically, Kim Jong-un has largely contributed to this predicament by sealing off the country's borders in January 2020, halting the import of essential goods like grain and fertilizers from China despite North Korea's limited growing season. Is he trying to alienate his people, or is he simply out of touch with reality? To gain a clearer perspective, let's examine North Korea's economic output, or GDP. The situation is bleak, ranking among the lowest globally. In 2023, North Korea's GDP per capita stood at $1,217 in nominal terms and $1,500 when adjusted for purchasing power parity. This places the country at 178th for nominal GDP per capita and 180th for PPP GDP per capita. So, how are the citizens managing? Unfortunately, for many, the answer is not well at all, with estimates indicating that in 2020 around 60% of the North Korean population lived below the poverty line. And now, Kim Jong-un has taken his isolationist ambitions a step further by involving North Korea in a foreign war. In a surprising and controversial move, reports in 2024 revealed that North Korea deployed troops to assist Russia in Ukraine. This decision not only risks further alienating the international community but also diverts resources, both human and financial, that North Korea can't afford to lose. With a struggling economy and widespread poverty, sending soldiers abroad for a war far removed from North Korea's borders seems like a disastrous miscalculation. The impact on the regime could be profound. First, such a deployment adds fuel to the fire of international sanctions, potentially cutting off vital aid or trade opportunities with sympathetic nations like China. Second, it exposes North Korean soldiers to the outside world, risking the spread of discontent when they return and share what they've seen. This move could undermine the strict information control that Kim's regime relies on to maintain its grip on power. North Korea is often referred to as a sealed country, its borders tightly controlled and its citizens kept in a bubble of propaganda. But as we know, when air gets into a sealed can, it's only a matter of time before mold starts to grow. For Kim Jong-un and his regime, that air is beginning to seep in, and it's just a question of when, not if, the cracks will give way. Do you think North Korea's involvement in Ukraine will accelerate the regime's collapse? Tell us what you think, and let's move forward. Number 6. Venezuela. With the largest oil reserves in the world exceeding 300 billion barrels, Venezuela seemed destined for wealth by the early 2000s. Unfortunately, a mix of misguided economic strategies, excessive reliance on oil income, and ongoing political turmoil has turned this potential fortune into widespread suffering. In recent years, the drop in global oil prices, along with corruption and soaring inflation, has led to a severe economic downturn. Treasury officials indicate that while oil continues to be a significant revenue source, it has also become a vehicle for fraud and corruption. This has undoubtedly created a damaging ripple effect, but the country has been in turmoil for quite some time, especially under President Nicolas Maduro, who has been stirring chaos since 2013. Just take a look at that infamous 2018 video of him enjoying lavish meals at Salt Bay's restaurant while countless citizens worry about their next meal. It's a stark contrast that feels like adding insult to injury. As of December 2023, World Division reports that 7.6 million people in Venezuela are in need of humanitarian aid, facing severe shortages of food, medicine, and other essentials. A staggering 82% of the population lives in poverty, and although inflation is easing, prices are still 25% higher than in 2023. Furthermore, the Council on Foreign Relations highlights that the oil price crash from over $100 per barrel in 2014 to below $30 in early 2016 plunged Venezuela into an economic and political crisis, and despite some recovery in prices, the situation remains dire. You might be wondering if Maduro can do anything right. Well, according to CNBC TV 18, Venezuela's debt has reached a staggering $154 billion. Is Venezuela's economic collapse irreversible, or could a new political approach save it? Share your insights, and let's dive into the next country. Number 5. El Salvador. El Salvador, a delightful gem nestled in Central America, is celebrated for its breathtaking beaches and lively culture, where the marimba seems to be a universal language. You know, that substantial instrument that resembles a xylophone's trendier sibling. This small nation boasts a rich tapestry of history, from the ancient Mayan empires to the passionate struggles for peace in the 20th century. With its captivating landscapes and diverse culinary offerings, El Salvador has an undeniable charm that captivates many. However, there's a twist in the tale. The country is currently facing significant economic hurdles. By 2023, sluggish growth in neighboring nations has hindered exports, while rising inflation and stricter monetary policies have added to the woes. When COFACE assessed El Salvador's strengths and weaknesses, they found a concerning number of challenges, primarily financial in nature. These issues include insufficient public infrastructure, a heavy reliance on the US for investment, trade, tourism, and remittances, a lack of independent monetary policy due to the USD being the main currency, limited access to multilateral financing, and pronounced inequality and poverty. Additionally, the introduction of Bitcoin as a second legal tender has unsettled the market and shaken investor confidence. The country's debt situation is particularly alarming. According to World Economics, El Salvador's debt-to-GDP ratio stands at 81.3%, translating to a staggering $24 billion in debt. So, what does this mean for the everyday lives of Salvadorans? High debt levels force the government to allocate a significant portion of its budget to debt servicing, which restricts funding for vital services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. As reported by Trading Economics, in 2022, 26.6% of El Salvador's population was living below the national poverty line. Will El Salvador's experiment with Bitcoin bring stability or chaos? Let us know your thoughts, and let's move on to the next story. Number 4. Iran. Iran is no stranger to economic hardship, but 2025 is proving to be one of its toughest years yet. The most visible issue is inflation, which has spiraled out of control. Official figures place it at around 50% annually, but many believe the real rate is even higher. Everyday goods like food, medicine, and fuel are becoming unaffordable for ordinary Iranians. The national currency, the rial, has lost over 90% of its value in the past decade, and by 2025, it's practically worthless in international markets. Iran's reliance on oil exports has been a double-edged sword. While the country sits on some of the largest oil reserves in the world, its ability to sell that oil is severely restricted. US-led sanctions have drastically reduced Iran's customer base, slashing oil exports from over 2.5 million barrels per day in 2018 to fewer than 1 million barrels by 2025. Even countries like China, one of Iran's few remaining buyers, are demanding steep discounts, cutting deeply into profits. Beyond sanctions, domestic mismanagement is a major factor. Corruption and inefficiency have drained state resources, with billions of dollars disappearing into the hands of powerful elites. The government's heavy-handed control over the economy has stifled private enterprise, leaving few opportunities for innovation or growth. Many small businesses have shut down, and unemployment hovers at around 20%, with youth unemployment nearing 30%. Energy infrastructure, once a point of pride for Iran, is now crumbling due to years of neglect and underinvestment. Power outages are increasingly common, hitting both industrial production and everyday life. Even in a country rich with natural gas and oil, many Iranians are struggling to heat their homes during the winter or keep their air conditioners running in the summer. Political instability is making things worse. Protests have become a near constant occurrence as people take to the streets to demand better living conditions and greater political freedoms. These uprisings are often met with violent crackdowns, further alienating the population and discouraging foreign investment. Iran's brain drain is also accelerating. Skilled professionals, particularly in medicine, engineering, and tech, are leaving the country in droves, seeking better opportunities abroad. By 2025, the exodus of talent is leaving critical sectors like healthcare and education severely understaffed. The situation is worsened by the government's repressive measures. In 2024, Iran executed nearly 1,000 people according to human rights organizations, a record number in recent years. These executions, often targeting political dissidents, protesters, and individuals accused of minor crimes, have further stifled the country's potential for progress. Under such oppressive conditions, fostering innovation or advancing technology becomes nearly impossible. The environment of fear and suppression has driven away creative minds and skilled professionals, exacerbating the brain drain that's already crippling Iran's future. Can Iran sustain its current path of repression and economic mismanagement? What do you think? Share your opinion before we continue. Number 3. Bangladesh. Bangladesh boasts the largest river delta on the planet, creating a stunning natural haven for thrill seekers. Yet, in a twist reminiscent of a gripping novel, this enchanting nation finds itself in a precarious financial situation. Following the resignation and subsequent exile of the defiant former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, uncertainty hangs over the country, raising fears of a potential bankruptcy crisis that draws parallels to its neighbor, Pakistan. In a December 2024 report, India.com highlighted that the garment industry, a vital pillar of Bangladesh's economy, is facing severe challenges. International buyers are canceling orders, unsafe working conditions have come to light, and protests are disrupting production. As the second largest garment producer globally, trailing only China, these issues are creating significant financial distress for many citizens. Amid the ongoing unrest, major global brands are beginning to distance themselves, prompting businesses to redirect their focus toward Indian manufacturers. Additionally, rising violence against minorities, particularly the Hindu community, has intensified concerns within the industry, with numerous companies teetering on the brink of closure. Currently, Bangladesh's debt stands at approximately $164 billion, accounting for 37.2% of its GDP. The situation is expected to worsen, with projections indicating that debt could soar to $325.61 billion by 2029, marking an alarming 102.12% increase. Moreover, CNBC TV 18 reports that the central bank has devalued the taka in recent years, yet this measure has not yielded positive results. The Asian Development Bank anticipates inflation to spike to 10.1% in fiscal year 25, primarily driven by soaring food prices. There are also growing concerns about a potential bank run due to the increasing number of unpaid loans. Will Bangladesh's garment industry bounce back, or is it heading toward collapse? Tell us what you think, and let's keep going. Number 2. Greece. Greece is not typically viewed as a poor nation. Its economy is advanced and industrialized, albeit smaller in scale compared to other countries. However, it may surprise many to learn that, despite its rich history and stunning landscapes, Greece has been facing significant financial challenges since the 2008 financial crisis. The country is often associated with a fragile banking system and declining wages, which, as of 2024, rank as the third lowest in the European Union. This situation is marked by low labor competitiveness, minimal technological advancement, and ineffective labor unions. As reported by Wage Indicator, the minimum wage in Greece stands at €830 per month in 2024. When juxtaposed with the estimated monthly living costs of €846 for a single individual, excluding rent, it becomes evident that many Greeks are experiencing financial hardship. Statista highlights that Greece's escalating debt has outpaced its GDP over the years, largely due to ineffective government management and excessive spending. A significant aspect of this poor fiscal management is the country's struggle with tax collection. Tax evasion remains a critical issue, causing Greece to fall behind other EU nations in its tax collection efforts. Consequently, tax rates are excessively high but affect too few individuals, akin to trying to divide a single slice of baklava among 50 people. Everyone desires a share, but there simply isn't enough to satisfy all. In 2009, Greece's budget deficit soared to over 15% of its GDP. Regarding that overspending mentioned earlier, Greek City Times reported that in 2021, Greece had the highest pension spending in the EU, accounting for 16.4% of its GDP. In total, the EU spent €1,882 billion on pensions that year, representing 12.9% of the EU's overall GDP. Do you think Greece's struggle with debt and tax collection will lead to another financial crisis? Share your perspective and let's move forward. Now it's time to find out the correct answer to our quiz. Which country defaulted on its debt in 2022? A. El Salvador, B. Sri Lanka, C. Bangladesh, D. Venezuela. The correct answer is B. Sri Lanka. Number 1. Sri Lanka. Take a look at this video. The events take place in 2022 in Sri Lanka. Protesters, dissatisfied with the country's economic collapse, stormed the presidential palace, and they decided to relax a bit in the president's pool. But how are things in Sri Lanka today? Often referred to as the jewel of the Indian Ocean, Sri Lanka is widely considered a genuine tropical haven. Located just south of India, this captivating island showcases verdant tea estates, breathtaking beaches, and a rich tapestry of wildlife. With its friendly inhabitants and delectable cuisine, think fragrant curries and freshly caught seafood, Sri Lanka feels like a hidden gem waiting to be uncovered. However, beneath its serene surface, the country has been grappling with significant financial challenges. The situation escalated dramatically in April 2022 when Sri Lanka defaulted on its staggering $83 billion debt, causing its foreign exchange reserves to plummet to a mere $50 million. According to Crisis Group, a combination of years of insufficient taxation, weak export performance, excessive reliance on debt, the COVID-19 pandemic, and critical policy missteps contributed to this crisis. Since then, tax increases and the removal of subsidies have severely impacted many Sri Lankans, while the affluent and influential have largely been insulated from these hardships. In October 2024, CNBC TV 18 listed Sri Lanka among 7 nations facing bankruptcy or in need of bailouts to prevent default, highlighting how escalating poverty and debt obligations hinder the nation's recovery. CEIC data reveals that by June 2024, Sri Lanka's national government debt had soared to $93.4 billion, while its nominal GDP stood at $20.9 billion in March 2023. This debt crisis has undeniably had a ripple effect, adversely impacting a significant segment of the Sri Lankan population. The World Bank estimates that in 2023, approximately 25.9% of Sri Lankans were living below the poverty line, with projections indicating that poverty rates will remain above 22% until 2026. Contributing factors include substantial debt service obligations, insufficient debt restructuring, a rollback of reforms, vulnerabilities in the financial sector, and the lasting repercussions of the crisis. Thank you for exploring the hidden corners of former empires with us. Should we create a similar video about the US states? And don't forget to check out more hidden discoveries on our channel.